Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the best and the worst recordings of the Brahms German Requiem. Oy vey, yes. The Brahms German Requiem, one of the most beloved choral works in all of Western civilization, and one which I am embarrassed to say I have actively detested for most of my life. I just couldn't stand the thing. I really couldn't. I couldn't get into it. I couldn't understand why anyone would want to listen to anything that dreary and that steeped in this sort of sanctimonious wallowing in sentimental death and mourning, and why would anyone write it, and what was the point? And I just didn't get it. Do I get it now? I really have no idea. I do know that I've come to love it. It's taken me a very long time and a lot of work, which is, one of those lessons that I think it's worth talking about just for a minute before we get into the nitty-gritty here. Because, as I've often said, there's a difference between, what you like and being able to recognize a masterpiece, even though you may not like it. I recognize that the Brahms German Requiem is a masterpiece. I never really liked it, but I knew that someday, if I stuck with it and found the right performance, it would hit me. And the right performance did hit me. And we're going to get to what performances were, and what the wrong ones were for me, for my understanding of the work. One of my very, very dear friends, the Brahms scholar Styra Avens, said to me, with her usual authority, she said, this is not a piece about death. It's about comfort and consolation. And of course, she's right. But it seems to me that there are sort of two ways of looking at performances. Either they're about death, and they're just dreary as hell, as Bernard Shaw pointed out when he trashed the piece and said it was only fit for an undertaker and the kind of thing only a corpse could tolerate. Or it's about consolation and something beautiful. And if you take the beautiful angle, well, all kinds of wonderful things happen, as I think we'll see. But it has a lot to do with the way that the work is interpreted. And so in coming up with this list, I have put together, we're going to go through 30 recordings of the German Requiem. 15 are keepers and 15 are not. And I have to say, the nots are not necessarily bad. They're just performances that didn't strike me after a lot of listening and thought and consideration in putting this talk together, because I really think that when you deal with a work like this that everybody loves or everybody does, you can't dismiss it lightly. I mean, I would. I don't mind dismissing anything lightly, but I really think with such a history of recording behind it, a discography, it deserves a little bit more careful consideration than I sometimes do. Usually, as you know, I would pick just my top 12 or my top 10 and let it go at that. But I'm not doing it this time. Why? Because I had to work so damn hard to get into the thing and listen to so many recordings, and I just kind of got hooked on it while I was doing it. So I'm going to just let it all hang out there, and we'll see how long this goes and how far we get. And originally, when I heard the German Requiem, there was one moment that appealed to me. That was it. The whole piece just passed me by. I was totally cold to it, and I found it just loathsome, except for this moment. That was it. Did you hear that? That was the one part that I liked. That was the chord on the word he in the sixth movement. Denn wir haben he. Boy, what a beautiful bit of harmony that is, isn't it? Gorgeous, gorgeous harmony, wonderful. If only you could do the German Requiem's greatest hits and for half a second take out the word he, I would have been happy. There wasn't anything else about the thing that appealed to me. And what really bothered me about it even more were the fugues. Oh, the fugues. it's German. It's a choral work. It has to have fugues. It has to have lots of fugues. The more fugues you can have, the better. And the more fuguey they can be, the happier we'll be. Oh my God, they drove me insane. Absolutely insane. First, there's that big long one in the second movement where the contrabassoon and the organ just land on a pedal like for like 20 minutes, it seems like. It's not. It's a couple minutes, but it's supposed to sound like it's going on forever. And it does, for better or for worse. But the one that really kills me is the one at the end of the sixth movement, the movement that has he in it. That fugue is, I still don't like it. For me, it's still the weakest part of the work. Why? Because Brahms works up this huge choral peroration where the chorus is screaming, "Oh, death, where is thy sting? Tot, wo ist dein Stücker, Stücker, Stricker, Buscher, Stipper, Stuckel, or Strickel, or whatever you call it in German. It's a poker thing. And they're all screaming about death. Where is thy sting? And oh, we've defeated death, and it's so great. And they come to this huge climax and this fabulous semi-cadence that you think is going to end in gloriosity. And then there's see, I can't even talk about it. It's so annoying. And then there's a diminuendo, and this fugue starts. Why? What does it do? It destroys the whole mood. It just ruins it. This is Brahms is saying, okay, it's religious. We can't be exciting. We can't let victory stay where it is. We have to have a fugue. We have to stop being dramatic and urgent and then sit back and just fugue about it. Talk about it for a while. Oh, yeah, let's do more. Oh, God, it's awful. It's just awful. And here is the moment in question. I'm going to play it for you. I've learned to like it more, and what's more, I've learned to appreciate performances that manage to make that transition between the "Oh death, where is your Stucker" thing to the fugue part without making it sound as though the record has skipped and you're listening to something that happens like 20 minutes later that's unrelated to everything that's come before. It's not entirely possible to do it, but here's a particularly good one. This is one of my memorable ones, and it's one of the memorable ones of a certain type, which we'll talk to in a bit. But this is Antony Witt with the Warsaw Philharmonic Orchestra and Choir on Naxos, and here is the passage in question. See what I'm getting at? I mean, wouldn't it have been nice if Brahms had just stopped when they're happily unstinging, with death? There's no need to go on for that, but he does, and so the interpretation has to make sense of it, and some do, and some don't. And then, of course, I started paying more attention, and what really struck me as beautifully and wonderful, of course, was of course the second movement. For all flesh ist Gras, denn alles Fleisch es ist wie Gras. Now that got to be really fun, because it's a march, but it's in triple time. It has a wonderfully Baroque sort of quality. It's like a saraband sort of thing. And it builds up to this beautiful crescendo. And from that moment on, I had a hook. I had a hook. Why? Because I could hear how performances handle this paragraph, because it's a paragraph. It's a musical paragraph. And it has a beginning, and it rises, and it recedes. And when it's done well, it is the most glorious thing in the world. And one of the things I always pay attention to is, how the brass parts are handled. It's very interesting, because what most people don't realize is that the opening of that movement is, da da, ba da, and then it comes in with a ya dum bum ba da dum. But that two-note motive is really the glue that binds the whole piece together. And Brahms repeats it. He repeats it all kinds of ways in all kinds of parts. Just that simple two-note motive. And for me, I was really curious to see or hear how different performers bring it out. And he particularly, Brahms does it, brings it out in the brass parts, in the big crescendo, behind that big crescendo. And so many performers just don't hear it at all. And it's like so weird. Why don't you hear it? I keep saying to myself, this is symphonic. This is the kind of thing I like, because as I've said, I'm a form whore. I mean, I love the way things develop and how they all fit together, and what the motivic fabric of the piece is. And so that really gave me something I could pay attention to. And here's a particularly good version of it. Again, it's Anthony Vitt on Naxos, which really shows you how to do it, bringing out the motivic interest while at the same time making sure that the chorus enunciates the text and makes the relationship between the music and the text all the more meaningful and coherent. So here is that whole paragraph, a minute and a half's worth of music roughly. It happens a couple times in the movement, but it is one of the most, I think, powerful and beautifully shaped musical paragraphs that anybody ever wrote. And it only took me about 25 years to figure that out. So there's hope. There's hope for all of you who don't like this or don't like some other piece which the universe has acclaimed a masterpiece that we just can't figure out. Sometimes you just have to stick with it. Sometimes you'll never get it. But listen to this and see if you get a sense of what I'm talking about. All right. It's hot stuff. Yeah, I know. Why didn't I know that the first time? I don't know. I can't explain it. I simply can't. It's all in the performance. It's all in your mood. It's all in whether it strikes you or not. So I never felt bad about the fact that I despised the Brahms Requiem, but I feel much better about the fact that I no longer do. So now, having finally made my peace with the work, and like I said, it's quite recent, only within the past few years, I have embarked on an orgy of Brahms Requiem listening, because even though I didn't like it, I had to review it. I've had to talk about it. I've had to know what a good performance is and what is a bad performance, and try, not to just poo-poo and dismiss the thing if it was my job to say something meaningful about it, but also, I hang on to my CDs. And so I've had lots of performances. They've been accumulating and accumulating. So I finally ran through them, and here are the results. First, we're going to talk about the performances I did not keep and why I didn't keep them. Sometimes I have a reason, sometimes I don't. Did not keep. I have them. Obviously, I kept them. But they're not in my keeper pile, the ones that really move me and that I think are the most meaningful. So this does not mean that these are bad, all of them. Some of them are, but some of them are pretty good. They're very good. But, then we get to the question of how many of these things you need in your collection, how many are you going to hang on to, and why, and which performances have moments that no other performances have that you think are keeping for that reason. All of you will make your own decisions about that. So don't be upset if one of the ones you love is not in my keeper pile. This is just me talking, but I think it's a pretty rational choice. So, first, most demented, Chelabadaki. Yes, Chelabadaka, Ducky, whatever his name is, Ducky. He was crazy. We all know he was crazy. He played all this stuff more slowly than anyone else ever has. He gets through this sucker in 84 minutes, which is, I think, probably the slowest one ever recorded. It's perfectly unlistenable. Just entirely. It's stupidly unlistenable. Everybody is straining. Everybody is having a hard time. And he's playing it. He has no sense of drama anywhere in anything he does. That's why he's so good with Bruckner, because there's a composer with no sense of drama. And so when he does the German Requiem, it's just soggy and soft-edged and makes you nauseous. Forget about it. The opposite of that, probably, is Herreweghe. This is not a bad performance. This is typical Herreweghe. It's light, it's underinflected, it's nicely sung, it's flowing in tempo, and you forget about it as soon as it's over. So Herreweghe is another one that I don't need. It has its nice moments. Here's one that actually gets to the heart of an issue that I think will come up more than once. Kempe. Now this is on Naxos Historical. This is a mono recording. It's actually a very good performance of its type, but it's quite slow. Tempo really matters in this piece. It really does. The German Requiem, generally speaking, can take anywhere from about an hour to, as we've just seen, 84 minutes. But the best ones, in my opinion, generally fall in between 60 and 70 minutes. Much over that. You can go over that a couple minutes, 72, 73, 74 minutes. Okay. You're pushing it. You're pushing it. But it depends also on how the timings are distributed. What weight the interpreters give different movements. I know some people make a big deal out of, for example, the soprano, solo, your Hab nur Traurigkeit, which is gorgeous, by the way. It's a beautiful, beautiful movement. But most of the performances here, they all sound pretty good. That can last from like 6 to 8 minutes. But what really does it is the opening and the last movement, because they share themes. And they generally go between 10 to 12 minutes is good. Some people stretch them out to 14 or 15. Kempe, I think, is really pushing it, because the opening here is 11, and when it comes back, 11 minutes, comes back at the end of the entire piece, it's 13 and a bit. And 13 and a bit is starting to push. And it's not that the tempo itself is so wrong. It's what it says about the nature of the interpretation. Is it going to be positive and consoling, or is it going to be more mournful and Wagnerian spiritual, or sort of, sentimental sobby? The slower it goes, the more likely it's going to be to err on the side of that kind of droopiness. And that droopiness sounds to me a little bit insincere. It sounds to me the work of a conductor who's trying too hard to make the point that the music makes best when it's treated with a little bit more energy and liveliness, even in the slow parts, So Kempe is a very beautiful performance. He was a wonderful conductor, but he was a chord guy. He wasn't so much into counterpoint. He was into color. And this is not a piece that's not a coloristic piece. I mean, it's Brahms, who's not a coloristic orchestrator, although there's a lot of gorgeous orchestration in here that I do listen for, as I just mentioned in the second movement. But Kempe here, I think, is a good example of a very good performance by a very good conductor that somehow just misses the intent of the work, in my view. So I appreciate it for what it is musically. It's very, very well sung. It's the Berlin Philharmonic. It's Fischer Dieskau and Elizabeth Grumer. I mean, what's not to like doing the solos? But, it just misses it for me. So, Kempe, no. Next, Marin Alsop on Naxos. This is a fast one. This one is, 64 minutes or so? Nothing wrong with it. It's neat. It's clean. It's well sung. It's very well sung because you've got the Leipzig Radio Choir. Ooh, yeah. Fabulous. Decent soloists. Everything is fine about it. And again, it left no impression on me whatsoever. And that's me. Maybe it will on you. I don't know. I just don't see what the point of making another German Requiem was. Harnoncourt. Nicholas Harnoncourt on RCA. What did he do? Well, this is a version with the Vienna Philharmonic that does, first of all, he does these stripped down Vienna Phil, Vienna Phil does period instrument things, which never works very comfortably, in my view. It is small scale on the one hand, but grossly distended on the other hand. It's really weird. It's strange, Harnoncourt. It's, I think, one of those performances where he lets his love of Baroque rhetorical devices run amok, and he tries very, very hard in a very mannered way to make expressive points that, I mean, no one is asking him to make. We don't need to hear from him at all. You know what always is funny about Harnoncourt is that he was, for someone who was the period instrument guy, the one thing period instrument ensembles never had was conductors. And some of these period instrument conductors are so excessively late romantic, mannered interventionist. And this is one of those, he's one of those guys. Bruggen was another. Sometimes they could be fabulous because they were conducting. And sometimes they were just awful. But authentic, they never were. Never in a billion years. And so I just find this boring. It's really boring. It's trudgy. It's absolutely trudgy. Not in a death-obsessed way. It's just heavy-handed and point-making for no reason. It's the kind of performance people always accuse Leonard Bernstein of doing, but which he really never did the way that people accuse him of doing. And that's what these guys are doing. And they got away with it. They get away with it because they're not Leonard Bernstein. They get away with it because people think they're doing something else. But, no. Okay, here's another one that really just never quite made it for me. Tenstedt on EMI with the London Phil. This is coupled to the fabulous Joachim Brahms Symphony Cycle. And, of course, the soloists, you get Jesse Norman and Jorma Hinnanen. They're very, very good. Very good. And boy, oh boy, is Norman's solo. It's 8 minutes and something. It's done rather slowly. And it's Norman. I mean, you always tend to go slower with her because she had such a beautiful voice. You just want it to go on and on. But I think this is just a little bit sloppy. And again, just dull, slow and heavy-handed, and we don't need it. So that's that one. What else do we not need? Oh boy, do we not need Giuseppe Sinopoli with the Prague Symphony or Prague Philharmonic Choir, and it's with the Czech Phil, which is absolutely wonderful. Of course, on the back, it says it's the Prague Philharmonic Chorus and Orchestra, and on the front, it says it's the Czech Philharmonic. As far as I know, it is the Czech Philharmonic. There's a fly in here. Damn it. Well, it's okay. I've got a zapper over there. Eventually, it'll get it. Okay, so what's wrong with this? Oh, it's just glutinous. It's glutinous, and it's cavernously recorded, and it just, nobody needs it. Again, unnecessary. These are all, in my view, unnecessary. Okay, Schulte Chicago Symphony. Schulte is a very good Brahms conductor. His Brahms Symphony Cycle is one of the best things he ever did, and this is a good performance of the German Requiem. Well, it's not. It's got Kiri Te Kanawa and Bernd Weichel, and the Chicago Symphony Chorus is terrific, and I just it's just slow. 77 minutes. Who needs 77 minutes when you could do it in 66? It's good, but for me, it's just a little bit on the snoozeroony side. So no. Who's this one? Oh God, talk about unnecessary. Robert Spano and the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra and Chorus. Is it bad? No. Is it good? Not really. And Telarc already had. Actually, they had two others. But they had Robert Shaw doing it with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra and Chorus. Better. Life is too short. Oh, God, no. John Elliott Gardner. This is his second one. Now, the first one is in my keeper pile. We'll get to that momentarily. Why did he do it again? What was the point? Did he have anything new to bring to the table? Well, the answer is no, he didn't. The only thing that could happen was that it would be worse. And indeed it is. I don't need to go into why it's worse. It's just worse. And just ridiculous. Okay. Levine, another fabulous Brahms conductor. He's also got the Chicago Symphony Orchestra and Chorus. This is better than Schulte's. It does trudge through the second movement. Den alles Fleisch, es ist wie Gras. It's over 16 minutes. I don't understand that. But, and it's with Kathleen Battle and Håkan Hagegård. It's good. It's just that there are others that are better. And it's not as well recorded as some of the best ones that I really, really like. So it's a nice thing to have in this box of all of his Brahms stuff. You get the Piano Concerto No. 1, the Four Symphonies, which are one of the reference editions of the Four Symphonies. They're amazing. So, if you get it in this box, you're not going to mind having it. But you're probably not going to come here for the German Requiem. I don't. What's this one? Oh, wow. There's another Naxos one. This is quite recent. This is Ralph Otto with the Deutsche Radio Philharmonic and the Bach Chor Mainz. Now, they've done some beautiful Bach recordings. I've enjoyed them, and I've talked about some of them in my Bach talks. They're quite splendid. But this, oh my God, this is also, what's this, 75 minutes. Okay, it's a little trudgy, but more than being trudgy, it's just boring. It just doesn't have accent. It doesn't have energy. It doesn't have the highs and the lows that you look for in the piece. Even a piece of sacred music, they have highs and lows too. There's heaven, there's hell. That's a high, that's a low. And this just put me to sleep. Really did. It just bored me. Okay, now we come to what I consider to be my worst German Requiems. My worst. On the whole, the winner for worst multiple recordings, let's put it that way, is Herbert von Karajan. Now, Karajan is horrible because Karajan is the for me the acme of the pseudo religiosity, sentimental, soporific, sanctimonious. He's trying to convince you that he's spiritual, and he does it by playing the music more and more slowly in time. Now, this was his first one. His first one, this is with was the Vienna Philharmonic with the Singverein, and you've got Elizabeth Schwarzkopf and Hans Hodder. It was recorded in 1947. So the sound is lousy, number one. But number two, people rave about this. I have no idea why. Yes, it is the young Elizabeth Schwarzkopf and the youngish Hans Hodder, and they sound terrific. But Karajan, oh, he's so boring. Oh my God. It just gets slower and duller and slower and duller. And this is not even his slowest one. The last movement here, I'm looking at this, it's 11 minutes. It's exactly the same. It's faster, actually, than the first movement. This is his best weighted performance, I think, on the whole. But it's just partly the sonics, partly Karajan's desire to be serious. And it always betrays him. I sometimes think with Karajan that the number of recordings he made of something is inversely proportional to the affinity he had for it. I think he was trying so hard to convince people. He was the great conductor of the Germanic, standard repertoire, because of course he had the Berlin Philharmonic and he was German or Austrian, and he had to do that stuff. But the more he did it, talk about, protesting too loudly, the less convincing he was, because we all know his best recordings are not in the Germanic repertoire. It's Shostakovich 10, Prokofiev 5, Honecker 3, the Second Viennese School. There's stuff he did that was incredible. And of course, a slew of opera recordings. And his Richard Strauss, too, was great. But in the symphonic repertoire, he could be very good. He did some very good Brahms. He did some very good Beethoven. I don't want to exaggerate this, but my point is that he was trying by repetition to drum into us the fact that he was the guy for this, and he wasn't. This is a dull performance of the German Requiem, and this one, so he did it 4 times? I think at least 4 times, 3 or 4 times. I don't know. There was this thing on DG that came out in the early 60s, and there was another one on EMI in 75, and the digital, he just kept doing it, hoping against hope that it would always get better or more convincing, and just the opposite happened. So this is with the Berlin Philharmonic. He had by then Karajan-ified the sound of the orchestra. He has smoothed out everything interesting that happened in the previous one with the Vienna Philharmonic, which never quite got Karajan-ified because it had as much of an ego as he did, and so he couldn't quite dominate them the way he did Berlin. And you've got Gundel Janowitz and Eberhard Wechter. It's very good soloists, but it's so boring. And this is the recording that everyone told me was so fabulous that I listened to that made me hate the German Requiem. I just thought it was a slick, boring, soporific, slimy, lots of S words in the pejorative sense, just terribly dull and insincere. That's the thing. Insincere and I just disliked the work after hearing this performance of it. And so I really made very little effort to try and come to love it for several decades. That's what happens sometimes when you hear a bad performance or one that just strikes you as wrong. But I got over it. Happily, I got over it. He did more after that, a couple more. But no, I don't think he ever had the measure of the German Requiem, as he never had the measure of most choral works. Because his Verdi Requiem was just as bad. His Missa Solemnis was awful. His Bach B minor Mass was, it's Bach, forget his Bach. That Magnificat, oh my God, it was terrible. He never liked choral music because he didn't like the chorus, and he could never get the balances he wanted. And when he wanted sheer beauty of orchestral sound and blend and all the things that he was interested in that were completely antithetical to the things that Brahms was interested in. And that's the problem with that version. Anyway, it's not the worst. It isn't, because there's a tremendous amount of skill and craft that went into everything Karajan did. He worked hard at getting the wrong sound that he got, just as Celibidache did, in getting the most awful, boring, dullest, slowest thing, which every chord had meaning, which meant that collectively they meant nothing. But there is a worse one, and that's this one. With Court Mazur. It's Court Mazur. This was his Brahms cycle with the New York Philharmonic and the Westminster Choir and Sylvia McNair and Håkan Hagegard. This is the worst German Requiem I've ever heard in my life, because it purports to be one that I should like. Tempo's on the quicker side. In fact, it's so quick, it's exactly 60 minutes. It's one of the very fastest ever, if not the fastest. But it manages to have all of Karajan's insincerity and slickness at much quicker speeds. That's an achievement. This is the most senseless, meaningless performance of the German Requiem I've ever heard. It's just awful. There isn't anything in here that registers as meaning something like that means something, something significant. God, it's awful. It's so bad. So this is my winner for worst German Requiem out there. Sorry, guys, and it's my hometown team, but boy, does this suck. And Mazur, what was going on with him? Did he believe a word of what he was doing? It was he was one of those conductors, I will say, who was so big on self-abnegation that he could sometimes simply make himself disappear. And here he makes the entire work with orchestra and chorus and two soloists disappear. Ugh. All right. So those are all the ones I'm not hanging on to. And you'll notice I don't put little superscriptions under them because I don't care about them enough to do it. But here are the ones that I believe are keepers. In one way or another, they're keepers for various reasons. And they are, there's at least one performance in here that I didn't review very favorably, but I still think it's a keeper. I think it's an important recording. And we'll talk about that when we get there. So first, I've already mentioned it. It was Anthony Witt, who is just a master at works with chorus and orchestra. I mean, his Mahler Eighth is my reference recording on Mahler 8. He's done fabulous work. His Dvorak Requiem is a reference recording for the Dvorak Requiem. Fantastic. Absolutely a fantastic conductor and wonderful at this kind of music. He balances the sound, the textures. He makes sure that the words are clear. And even though this is one of the slower ones, this is a slow one. It's over 75 minutes, just a bit over. It has that sincerity. It has that effortless naturalness that I think you want. And I think that it's part of Brahms. It's the Brahms aesthetic. Maybe it's part of his Lutheran aesthetic. You don't prettify what shouldn't be prettified. You let it speak plainly and sincerely. And that's what Witt does. And all of these performances are quite wonderful. And it's on Naxos. It's inexpensive. It's a wonderful performance. It really is, if you like a version that's a little bit on the slower side. Another conductor who was big on sincerity, as everyone will admit, was Giulini. And surprisingly, Giulini, this is not one of the slower versions. Well, it is one of the slower ones. It's like 73 minutes, but it doesn't come across as all that slow. And it isn't compared to these other people I've been talking about. Not bad at all, especially for late Giulini. He got it as well. Everything Giulini did was sincere. Sometimes it could be sincere to the point of lethality. It could be really, really a bit slow. But this works really well. This is the Vienna Philharmonic and Barbara Bonney and Andreas Schmidt. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And he also understands. You see, he's got 10 minutes for the first movement, 11 for the finale. He gets it. He gets where the music's going. And I don't know anyone who talks about this performance, but I find it very moving. It's very, very beautiful. So that was a very pleasant surprise to re-encounter. Because I think when it came out, everyone sort of said, well, it's late Giulini, it's probably just boring. It's not. It's not at all. Also, quite lovely on Deutsche Grammophon is Abbado. Abbado was a great Brahms conductor, unquestionably. His Brahms symphony cycle in Berlin, I think, is the best thing he did in Berlin. And he does a very fine German Requiem as well. He's another conductor. He was also, could be self-abnegating while simultaneously micromanaging, which is really an achievement when you think about it. How to be a humble interventionist. That takes work. Some would say it takes genius. I don't know. But I will say this. When he was doing Brahms, he was usually at his best. And this is a very, very beautiful performance. He did all the major choral works in connection with his symphony cycle. So it's well worth hearing. And it's Cheryl Studer and Andreas Schmidt. And it's terrific. What's not to like? So Abbado is really good. Here's one that's going to probably give shock. This is one of those performances I keep because it opens up new vistas in the art of interpretation, legitimate new vistas that you might not have thought were, anything that would work, but it does. And that's Ansermet. Ansermet doing the German Requiem. Yes. First of all, Ansermet was a very analytical kind of guy, and he approaches the piece in a very unsentimental fashion. He's not one of the quicker guys out there, actually, but the plain spokenness, the naturalness. I say plain, that's sort of pejorative, isn't it? Let's say the naturalness is certainly there. And you're not going to believe how good it sounds with the Orchestre de la Suisse Romande and the choir of the Suisse Romande and the choir Pro Arte de Lausanne. I mean, okay, it's not the greatest choir in the world. And, who's singing? Oh, the singers are great. It's Agnes Giebel and Hermann Prey. Fantastic. Doesn't get much better than that. So you're in really good shape for the solo singing. I like this performance. What I really like about it is it doesn't do any of the things that I claim to like in all the other performances I listen for. Like in the second movement, denn alles Fleisch es ist wie Gott, whatever you do it. I say I like to hear the motivic stuff and I like to hear the big crescendo. He doesn't do it that way. He somehow, he knits the whole thing together absolutely seamlessly, without having anything sort of like stick out at you. I don't know how he does it that way. I don't know, but it works. It works beautifully. It has flow. I mean, he subordinates incidental detail, I think, to that overall sense of inexorable momentum. And that's what also May captures in this, and it's awfully worth hearing. Truly worth hearing. If you have a chance, this is on Eloquence, Decca Eloquence with his Brahms cycle. Give it a shot. It will surprise you. Now, this is my honorary keeper performance. Actually, it's a very, very good performance, but it's also very underrated, kind of a sleeper. But the reason I had it in here, the reason I became aware of it, was totally non-musical, and I have to confess, it's the Leinsdorf with Montserrat Caballé and Cheryl Milnes, who are really, really terrific soloists. And it's the New England Conservatory Chorus. Now, it just so happens that my partner in ClassicsToday.com, David Vernier, was in the New England Conservatory Chorus and in this performance under Leinsdorf. He has very happy memories of it, although Caballé had a horrible cold. He talks about it in his reviews of the German Requiem on ClassicsToday.com, because he's mostly the guy who reviews German Requiems, him and Victor Carr. And he loved this performance when he finally heard it. And so I listened to it. And it's really, really damn good. Leinsdorf was, one of those conductors who was another sort of, he wasn't a heavy-duty interventionist. And he wasn't always very imaginative. But he was a wonderful operatic conductor and a wonderful accompaniment conductor. And this is the kind of work that responds well to people who don't get in the way excessively. And he doesn't. He lets the singers sing, and they do with lusty enthusiasm. And the Boston Symphony sounds fabulous. And with great soloists, it turns out that it's a really good German Requiem. And I was surprised. David was right. I mean, he usually is when it comes to choral music. He's a choral composer and conductor and really knows his choral music. So, yeah. And he and I, by the way, used to argue endlessly over this piece, because for most of my time here at Classics Today, which was, we started in 1999, and before then, David was the editor of CD Review, and I was one of his writers, one of his staff writers, and then we switched roles sort of when we got Classics Today going, in some ways. But I made sure to bring him on board, and so we had this ongoing fight for about 20 years about the German Requiem. He loved it, I hated it, and we would poke at each other about it. But he was right, and I was wrong. And I am happy to admit it. Freely admit it. Okay. Oh, yeah. This performance was given a very positive review on ClassicsToday.com by Victor Carr. And had he not reviewed it, I would never have paid attention to it. It's really extraordinarily good. This is Colin Davis on RCA with, Angela Maria Blasi and Bryn Terfel, baritone, yes, with Bavarian Radio Symphony Orchestra and Chorus. Now, of course, the chorus is wonderful. This is not a heavy Teutonic performance, although the second movement, Den alles Fleisch, again, is quite measured. But the rest of it really moves with exceptional lightness of feeling. And even though it's not quick, it ain't quick, it's not one of the fast ones, but it's very, very beautifully done. And I was very impressed when I heard it. I wasn't really expecting anything. I didn't know what to expect, but Victor reviewed it and I listened to it because, I read criticism too. I'm not stupid enough to think that mine is the only opinion that matters. Well, I know that's true, and you know it's true, but I mean, I'm interested in other people's, if only for academic reasons. And you have no idea how many fabulous things I've discovered that I just wouldn't have had time for had it not been for one of my colleagues. I mean, I owe them a tremendous debt, and this is a beautiful German Requiem. Colin Davis. And now we come to John Eliot Gardner again. Now, this is his first one that was on Philips. It's now on Decca with the Orchestre Révolutionnaire et Romantique. Pompous ass. Oh my God, how you name something that. And the Monteverdi Choir. And yes, Gardner can be so pretentious and at the same time so uninteresting and emotionally neutral. But his choral recordings, some of these choral recordings that he did with these folks, I mean, there was the Berlioz, Misses, the Mass, the Solennel thing, the Mass, and the Verdi Requiem, which is fantastic. He did some wonderful, wonderful stuff. And this was one of those. This is a terrific German Requiem. The performance is swift. It's one of the quickies. It's 9 minutes in the first and last movements. Oh, I love that part. Let me see if there's a timing here for the whole thing. Yes, it's 65 minutes, which is, I think, just about ideal. The singing is fantastic, clean and clear and precise, and the orchestra is full of color and detail. And it's not, the piece responds to people who let it be itself. And much as we sometimes hate those, the performance speaks for itself, it doesn't get in the way, the performers just, well, sometimes that works. And it really works with the German Requiem, and it's a beautiful performance, and it's one that is completely, entirely superior to the remake in every respect, in terms of the quality of the singing and the sonics and the orchestra. I don't know why would he do it again? Why? Well, because he's narcissistic and self-regarding, and he had his own label, and he was trying to screw these people. That's why. I mean, I understand why. But if you're going to, it's perfectly fine to want to screw your other label, but you got to do it better. You have to be successful. You can't suffer from an inability to get the job done. You know what I mean? So if you want to hear Gardner and you want to hear a great German Requiem, get the first one. The Decca for Philips or whatever it's on now. Next, oh wow, yes, Frieder Bernius. This is on chorus. Now my partner David Vernier was not so thrilled about this German Requiem. He thought that Bernius had some interpretive heebie-jeebies periodically that got in the way of the music's flow and sort of naturalness. And he's kind of right, but I like the heebie-jeebies. I think what Bernius does in here is kind of fun. And this is an interesting performance because, Bernius is a period instrument guy, and he's got, the Kammerchor Stuttgart, which is amazing, fabulous choir, and the Klassische Philharmonie Stuttgart, which is a pickup period instrument band, I assume. And let's see, Julia Borchert, soprano, and Michael Voll, baritone. I accept some of the, little Luftpausen and odd things he does here and there and tempo adjustments because I think they're all motivated pretty well by the expression and by the text. And what's interesting is that although this is a light and swift performance, it's 67 minutes, and they're small forces, and there is that compensating clarity that you better have if you're going to do it with small forces. And I think that I like it. I just find that it goes down very easily. You can listen to it straight through and you come out feeling refreshed, which is a big deal in the German Requiem, I think. I think you should come out feeling refreshed, but you don't always. And this is one of those where you do. It's a lovely performance, and I enjoy it more and more with time. This is a performance that my colleague up in Montreal, Christophe Huss, really liked. You notice how I'm talking about my colleagues a lot in this because, like I said, this was not a piece that I originally took to. And so I relied on others to help show me the true path. And thank God that I have good friends whose musical opinions I trust. I count on them as much as anybody does. And, that's part of the joy of music, is that it's a collective enterprise, isn't it? So, yes, Frieder Bernius on Caros. It's a live recording. It has that sort of excitement and tension to it. I just think it's great. I really do. A classic. Robert Shaw. Now, Robert Shaw with Arlene Auger, who's fabulous, and Richard Stilwell, who's also pretty fabulous, with the Atlanta Chorus, which is fabulous, and the Atlanta Symphony, which is very, very good. Very, very good. It's a Shaw performance. It's about the choir. We know that. That's what it's going to be. He doesn't deny the orchestra its opportunity to do its thing. And the more, I have to say something about that too, because the more I listen to this piece, the more attention I give to the orchestral parts, because they are beautiful. I mean, if you listen to that soprano solo, there is so much gorgeous writing for woodwinds, and the voice and the woodwinds. I mean, in a great performance, they really have to intertwine and play off each other. Brahms was always into that sort of thing. He was always forcing the musicians to try and outdo themselves in things that never sound difficult. They don't sound hard, but they are. I mean, you only realize just how much craft and how much expressive beauty there is sometimes when they really get it right. When they don't, it sounds good. I mean, it's always going to sound euphonious and lovely, but when they really pay attention and get it right, you have magic, absolute magic. And there is a good bit of that in here, because the voices are so well suited. And Shaw was a wonderful conductor in this repertoire. He really was. There will be some who believe there are more exciting versions out there, as there probably are. I don't think I have a timing for this one, but they all look very sensible. Yeah, it's a normal 70-ish minute performance, and it's magnificently recorded and as well sung as it ever will be. So this is a great one and a wonderful memento of Robert Shaw's, unbelievably wonderful career. A fabulous career. Next. Okay, we're getting to the end, guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, let me see here. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, we're almost in the top 5. Almost, not quite. Yeah, okay. Here's the one that I told you about that I actually didn't review so well when it first came out, or when I first heard it. And I still don't think it's a great performance, but I do think it's an important one for what it tells us. Bruno Walter. And this is mono. It's not bad mono. It sounds okay. And it's with the Westminster Choir, the Westminster Chorus. Yeah, the Westminster Choir, the New York Phil, and George London, which is always nice to hear, and Irmgard Seefried. The choir's not great. At this point, the Westminster Choir was nothing to write home about. And we're talking about, the early 50s when this was recorded, something like that. And, what can I say? But, and here's the but, Bruno Walter was a contemporary of Brahms. I mean, he really knew the Brahms style. His Brahms is extraordinary. And so while this performance is not going to be the one, how long is it, I think? Oh, well, first of all, it's very, very quick. I think it's the fastest Brahms German Requiem of all of them. Let me just see for a second. This is 70 more minus 12, 62. So yeah, 61 minutes. It's just as fast as Court Mazur. And it's a very interesting comparison, because Court Mazur was also with the New York Philharmonic, and the Westminster Choir. And while Court Mazur, of course, had the better singing, and at that point, probably the better orchestra, boy, is this 100% more interesting in terms of conviction and shaping and phrasing and intelligence. And that's why I included here, because historically it's important because of Walter's connection to Brahms himself and the era in question, but also because it tells us that, that what Mazur was doing wasn't necessarily wrong in concept. It was just wrong in execution, in result. So yeah, I like this Bruno Walter performance now, even though I gave it like a 6 when I reviewed it. But there are things in it that make it a keeper for me, even though it's in mono, and even though the chorus isn't too fabulous. It's a keeper. If you love the work. I mean, if you love, if you're collecting German Requiems. If you're not, you don't have to rush. Okay. This one, Dan Davis at ClassicsToday.com, loved this performance. And so I naturally hauled it out and listened to it. Raphael Kubelik live on Audita. This is wonderful. Whoa, this is beautiful. It's a slow one, 74 minutes. Phenomenally detailed. Unbelievably beautiful orchestral details all over the place. And as Dan points out, the soloists, well, they're Edith Mathis and Wolfgang Brendel. Now, Brendel is terrific. Mathis is not in good shape for this performance. You know, everyone has their off days, and she was having an off day, which is a shame because she was a wonderful singer. But this is not Edith at her best. Edith at her best. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's about Kubelik, about great choral singing, fantastically probing interpretation. He gets into all of the little nooks and crannies of instrumental color in this piece without ever stopping the flow. And that's what's critical. Absolutely critical. It's wonderful. It's in my top 5. And had Dan Davis at classicstoday.com never told me about it, I would not have known. And had not been here to share it with you now. And it's really, really marvelous. Okay, now we're in the top 4, top 3-ish. You'll see why. This one we actually talked about rather recently because I did a review of Herbert Kegel, and we talked about him doing the German Requiem. Here is the solo version of it, all by itself on Berlin Classics with Marianne Hegender and Siegfried Lorenz. Now, Kegel, who was, a happy East German, well, until he committed suicide, but that doesn't mean he wasn't a happy East German, because happy East Germans still commit suicide. But the bottom line is, it's a great German Requiem. First of all, you've got, again, the Leipzig Radio Choir, which Kegel, I think, founded and was one of the all-time great choirs in the history of the universe. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, is this well played and well sung. And it has just that absolute, natural, forward-looking, totally unaffected. Oh, it's great. It's just great. And this is 71 minutes, which is just about perfect in terms of overall shaping and conception. It's one of the great German requiems. Kegel was such a great conductor. He really was. And this is as good a piece of conducting as he ever did. And it's on Brilliant Classics. If you can still find it, I mean, you should hear it. If you love the German Requiem, you got to hear this recording. You really do. So that's that one. Now we're going to come to the performance that sold me once and for all on the German Requiem. It wasn't the original performance that sold me. That's the however version. But the one that really convinced me after I was sort of sold on it, let's put it that way, one of my favorites. Can I just say that and leave it at that? Yeah, Blomstedt. Blomstedt with San Francisco Symphony Orchestra and Chorus, another great, great chorus on Decca. Blomstedt, of course, as we've said so many times in these videos, is one of those conductors who conducted with total unaffected naturalness. Everything that he did. Sometimes the results could be boring, but quite often they were revelatory. And his German Requiem it's the work of a true believer. Blomstedt's a Seventh-day Adventist, and while I don't like to bring biographical details into performances, I like to think that there's a difference between people who, in conductors, sometimes people too, who are sincere believers to the point where you just don't question. It just is. You know what I mean? With sincerely religious, you know this, because I'm not a religious person, but I know sincerely religious people, they don't have to make a point of their religion because it's just part of who they are. It's what they are. And the truths that they believe are self-evident. And so they're not threatened by anybody. They're not vindictive about other people. They don't dismiss other forms of belief. They just are who they are, and they're comfortable. And this is the kind of thing you need to put over, I think, the religious aspect of the German Requiem. It has to be taken entirely as a given. You don't need to make points. It doesn't need to push. It doesn't need to show itself how sacred it has to be. It doesn't have to prove anything to anybody other than that it's great, great music and the words will speak for themselves. And that's what happens in this performance. It is extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary, gorgeously recorded, and it's with, let's see who's singing, Elizabeth Norberg Schultz and Wolfgang Holzmeier, and it's one of the handful of great German requiems, unquestionably. So if you really want to get like a great modern version and modern sound, I would go with Blomstedt in a heartbeat. It's just such a wonderful performance, and it's one of the quicker ones too, by the way. Let's see what the timing is if I can find it. But usually they tell you somewhere here how long it lasts. Well, maybe they don't. Oh yeah, here it is. It's down here, but it's hard to see. It's 70 minutes. 70 minutes. It's really, timings, everyone says, well, it depends on internal proportion. It's true in this piece, as I've already said, but sometimes you get an awfully good picture of where you're going by how long the whole thing lasts. And this is fabulous. However, there is the one that, of course, taught me that the German Requiem is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and that was, you're going to know it, it's coming, Klemperer. Yes, Klemperer. Both Klemperers. There are two of them. He makes up numbers 14 and 15 out of this stack of 15. Now, the classic Klemperer is this studio recording with the Philharmonia with, again, Elisabeth Schwarzkopf, who is not her usual icky poo self, and Fischer Dieskau. It was also, wonderful and terrific on this. And the two of them, they were with Klemperer. I don't think they dared screw around with Klemperer, frankly. He had very clear ideas about what he wanted. But this is the performance of a person who has absolutely nothing to prove other than what a great piece of music this is. Wow, is this special. It has that titanic build-up for the second movement. It has effortless control of tempo, fabulous transitions, wonderful solo singing, a great choir, and, crucially, Klemperer's trademark emphasis on woodwind sonority, which makes the whole thing so colorful, so much more colorful than most other performances. And in spite of the fact that Klemperer had a reputation as a slow guy, especially as he got older and slower, this is a quick performance. It really is. I think it's 70 minutes, roughly that, maybe 66. It's one of the fast ones, which is fascinating to me because it shows us that we understand, that Klemperer understood that lack of sentimentality, of sticky, tacky sanctimoniousness was critical to putting the piece over. And frankly, that kind of sanctimonious, tacky sentimentality was utterly foreign and alien to Klemperer's culture. And of course, he was another contemporary of Brahms. And so it's interesting to compare these performances to Bruno Walter, too, and realize that the people who were conducting this, who were around when Brahms was around, did take it more quickly than we're used to. These 75, 80-minute, sort of navel-gazing, snooze fests. It's not the way the piece is supposed to go. Klemperer, I listened to it and said, holy crap, the piece has everything. It has drama, it has color, it has climaxes, it has flow, it has gorgeous harmony. I just loved it. And I hadn't heard it originally because, I was born in 1961. You have to think about how these things work out, And Klemperer was history by early 1970. When I was in my teens, in the 70s, the guy was Karajan. That's who you started with. And Klemperer, was on EMI, but in the United States it was Angel. It was a 2-disc set with grotty pressings. And Klemperer was on DG. It was glamorous. And you saved up your money for it to be disappointed. And it wasn't until quite a bit later, literally decades later, and of course the Klemperer went out of print, so you missed your shot, you missed your opportunity. And then when CDs finally started coming out, and this finally showed up on CD, and I went and grabbed it. This is actually the Japanese pressing, but I finally grabbed it when it came out originally on CD, and I just put it on and went, whoa, because I was doing Klemperer recordings, not because I cared about the German Requiem. I wanted to hear the Klemperer discography as it was re-released on CD. It was my big chance. And so I listened. And this is what happens when you keep on listening. It works. It really works. So this is the studio version, the classic recommendation, and it still is. But I also have to point out there is a live on ICA Classics. This is with the Cologne Radio Symphony and the Cologne Radio Choir with Elizabeth Gruber and Hermann Prey. Yay! What a bunch of soloists. This is unbelievable. It's mono. It's very good broadcast quality mono with a very well captured organ. I reviewed this on classicstoday.com. It's 61 minutes. It's as fast as Bruno Walter. And it is, when is it from? I think it's from 56. Yeah, it's from 56. You get, I think, a bit of 2 minutes of rehearsal, and you also get the Mozart Serenata Notturna. There's room for a coupling. That's how quickly they get through it. But this is so exciting. Oh my God. It's unbelievably intense. It really is. It's so exciting it almost gets out of control in places. There are places where the soloist and the choir, they just start screaming. The discipline isn't always of the finest, but it is Klemperer's conception, clearly, and just thrilling beyond belief. For those of you who care about historical recordings and really want to hear a great historical recording of the German Requiem, this is the one to get. The Klemperer on ICA. It is absolutely makes you sweat. It's so exciting. And I never knew it could be that way with this piece. And it's only because my friends and all of you for all those years kept telling me I was out of my mind and thinking that the Brahms German Requiem was a piece of junk. But as a result, as I hope you've all been able to see, I have been able to discover just miracles of musical expressiveness and gorgeousness and thrilling experiences, all because I kept on listening. So I did my job. Now it's time for you to do yours. Keep on listening, folks. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.